Hello. Something slightly different for you today, a bonus episode of the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. A couple of weeks ago, I sat down with the great Adam Hollioake for half an hour. 20 years on from leaving Surrey as a player, he is back in South London as part of their coaching staff. And it's fair to say he's been through a lot in the last 20 years. He moved back to Australia shortly after the death of his brother Ben, created a TV show, started his own business, was declared bankrupt, was a boxer, was a cage fighter, and more recently coached around the world from Queensland to Afghanistan to England to Pakistan. Here's a chat about his last 20 years between leaving Surrey and coming back home, and a bit on his time before then too, as one of the most successful captains in the history of English domestic cricket. He also tells us what a 12-year-old Mark Butcher was like. Hope you enjoy it. Great to have you on the show. So you're back here at the Kia Oval after 20 years. Is it good to be back?
Yeah, it's always good to be back. Love it here. It's, I don't know, I guess I was thinking the other day when I came in, it's probably most people when they're growing up, they've got a family home or something where they spend the majority of their time. But we moved around so much as kids that I actually think this is probably the place I've spent the most time in my life. So when I come here, it's got this sort of weird nostalgic home feeling about it.
How did the move come about? There's some familiar faces from when you were last here, but not many.
No, obviously Alec's the main one. He's the director of cricket. I played with Alec through my whole career. So, there's I think Gareth Batty was a junior player when I was here. I think Jay Dernbach was around. Steve House, and then a few of the officers and a couple of the security guards are the same, but otherwise it's all new faces.
On your time here, first time round, how did you end up at Surrey in the late 80s, early 90s? People detecting an Aussie twang.
Yeah, so I was, my dad was an engineer, so we travelled around a lot as kids, and then he got offered a job here in London, and they ended up putting me in school in St George's down in Weybridge, and then as soon as I went there, I ended up in the Surrey youth system and came through. My first Surrey representation was with the Surrey under-12s, and I came across a young Mark Butcher then, so we were both in the same under-12 side, and then I think Ali Brown, Graham Thorpe, Martin Bicknell were in the a couple year above, so I sort of spent my youth growing up with those guys. It's sort of ironic that we ended up playing together in the men's team here for 20 years. So,
what was a 12-year-old Mark Butcher like?
I didn't like him, hey. It was I didn't like him. Well, the first time I met him, I went, "Who is this guy?" Because he was cool as he was. He had the sunglasses. He had all the gear. His dad played for England, and I had nothing. So I think I was just jealous. So yeah, he was very much the professional, even at 12 years old, and I wasn't. So I was straight out the bush and pretty raw. And but it's amazing when I say I didn't like him, it was probably only for that my first impressions were that. It's ironic now. Here we are, 40 years later, and we're the best of mates still. So it's it's a weird moment.
Funny you mentioned Butcher, but Butcher's been part of the podcast for a few years now, and whenever he makes a comparison to a captain in a positive light, he always compares them to you. And you had a very successful time here at Surrey as captain, 3 championships, a couple of white ball wins as well. First T20, six, okay.
It's a 9 in all, mate. not that I'm counting or anything.
What would you put the success from that era down to? Particularly, I know you will say all the players are great, but your captaincy as well. Butcher's someone who doesn't throw around praise lightly, and literally every time he compares a captain in a positive way, he compares him to you.
That's pretty flattering, because he is probably very unheralded during that time. I still say he's the best cricket brain that I've played with or come across. His knowledge of the game and is second to none. So I used to lean on him quite a lot. So for knowledge, maybe that's why he liked my captaincy, because it was basically listen to everything he said. But the thing that made us good, and it was the sort of perfect storm. We had a lot of characters, strong characters, had bloody good cricketers. I mean, they were good cricketers. That can't be overlooked. I mean, I know everyone says don't mention that, but we had the best batsmen in the country. We definitely had the best spinners in the country, and we had one of the best, if not the best, fast bowling. So we had the artillery. Of course, they've got to be managed. They weren't always easy to manage. I mean, I've seen a lot of good sides not win things and underachieve, even ourselves in the years previous. So they definitely took some management. But we also had, it's like Mark was very good. I'd lean on him for tactical. I'd bounce things off him tactically. I had Ali Brown, who was really outside the box thinker. I used to, if the straight down tactical stuff that Mark and I came up with weren't working, I'd speak to Ali, and he'd always have a left of field idea. And then it was just us being together for a period of time and getting to know one another and know what our strengths and weaknesses were. Like, I knew when to turn to Brownie, or I knew what Butch and I needed to have a discussion. Butch was also good because he kind of acted a little bit as my conscience as well. I've got a pretty big ego, so because I think no one else could have said it to me, because I'm a pretty strong character, and I'm not that easy to approach. I wouldn't imagine. I don't know. Maybe I am, but Butch was always pretty honest, and I think that came about from the fact we'd known each other from when we were 12 years old. He was able to point out things that he didn't think was right, and I think that's any good team I've been involved in. It's got healthy conflict, and that's the ability to question one another, and I think that's the only way you actually get good results. And I think we definitely had that. Everyone from the outside thinks that we were this group of guys who godparents to one another's kids and hung out together and did everything together. I mean, there were guys we got along well with, but there was some good ding dong arguments in there as well, and some questioning one another, which I think is healthy. I think it's how quickly you get over those things, which stands you in good stead to win competitions. When people think of captaincy, I think they think of, do we have 3 slips or 2 slips and 2 gullies? I mean, that bit's easy. If you and I went out and captained the game now, we probably wouldn't do it. There's a lot of the game that manages itself. There's probably 2 or 3% where we might make some tactical changes, and I could probably count on one hand the amount of games that I think my captaincy won tactically, where I made a tactical decision, and it proved to be the thing which won us the game. That doesn't happen very often. I can remember a couple where it cost us the game as well. So I feel like captaining is about getting the best out of each individual player, is making each player feel as good about themselves as they can. The analogy I like to give is, if I ask you what you're like when you're at your most confident, and how you walk down the street when you're feeling really good about yourself, as opposed to when you've just had a whole bunch of bad luck and things are going wrong, you sort of like walk, down the street kicking the can along the street, you don't feel good. I feel that as a captain, if I can make people feel good, and I've got 11 guys going out onto the pitch, walking out there confidently and feeling good about themselves, that outweighs any tactical decision that I can make. Like I said, those tactical decisions do come about, but I think if you start with the starting point of just making everybody feel confident and you've got belief in them, I think that's a really good starting point for a captain.
One player I wanted to ask about is Sack Lane. What was he like to captain? Is he ridiculous?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I played a game with Sack Lane the other day, and I actually said that, if people look back on the careers of, Shane Warne, Muralitha, and Anil Kumble, Sack Lane, they probably would say that Sack Lane's not the best of that group. And that's probably fair. I think even he would probably agree with that. But there was a period between 96, 97 and 2000. I don't know if anyone's ever bowled better than that, just for that period. I mean, we're talking, he was just bowling people out like first-class players. It's like when you go and you see a school game and a kid's too good for the other kids. that's what he was like during that period. And I don't think I've seen anyone as dominant as that. So when I get asked who's the best cricketer I've ever played with, I go, Saqlain Mushtaq between 96 and 2000 is the best cricketer I've seen.
Before we started recording, you asked what we're talking about, and I said I saw a post on Instagram when you marked your return to the club, and you sort of outlined what's happened in the last 20 years since your last year. So quite a lot has happened. So should we start at the beginning? So you leave Surrey in 2004. You're still quite young. Surrey was still a very successful side, competing in all fronts back then. What was it? What was it like making that decision? Why did you make the decision at that age?
Yeah, that's probably the hardest and probably the worst decision I've ever made in my life. I think the reason I made the decision was I felt like I needed to be back home with my family. My mum and dad were back in Australia. I felt that they needed my support after my brother dying, and that I would be best served helping them and being back home in Australia. And I don't know. I guess at that stage, probably up until that age in my life, I hadn't made many bad decisions. I mean, I'm only young. I haven't had much time to make many bad decisions. So life had always been pretty good for me, like career-wise. So I just presumed that was how life goes on. So I just presumed whatever I did would be fine. So I went back there to be with them. But in life, I don't know. We don't just sit around. I don't sit around with my mum and dad, holding their hands. Your life's got to go on. So when I went back, then it was kind of a case of, okay, now I walked away from cricket. I've got to try and reinvent myself. So try and work a way forward. I had a property development business with my dad, and that was kind of the focus of what we're doing. But we got caught out in that global financial crash in 2008, 2009, around then. And we lost everything. So, which was hard because obviously I'd worked for 15 years here to get myself in a good financial position, and I'm not saying I was never have to work another day in my life, but I had a sort of element of financial freedom. So then that global financial crash that caught so many people out caught us out, and lost pretty much everything. So then had to start again. So then from there, whilst I was doing that, I created and developed a TV show, which was shamelessly a rip-off of Superstars. But we changed some elements, but the premise was the same, just taking athletes from all different sports and competing them against one another to see who the best all-round athlete was. And this show was called Australia's Greatest Athlete. And then whilst I was doing that, I was just training, trying to keep myself fit, and started out on a boxing career. So by accident, really. So I was just training down.
How do you accidentally become a boxer?
Well, when I say that does sound a bit blasé, but I'd done boxing since I was 12. So anybody who knows me knows that I'd been involved in boxing from a very young age. So to those people, it wasn't a surprise. But I guess to 99% of the cricket world, they had no idea that that was something I did during the off seasons or I'd done from such a young age. When I say I got into it accidentally, I just went down and I was just doing some jiu-jitsu and some wrestling at a club. And one day I turned up and they changed the timetable around, and it was now a boxing session. So they asked me if I wanted to stay. I said, I'll stay and do it. Anyway, the guy said, who's the owner of the gym, said, "You've done this before?" I said, "Yeah, I've done it before." So then he asked me to come down and spar some of his guys who were getting ready for Australian titles. And then next thing you know, he asked me if I wanted to fight professionally. But I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm too old, and I don't really think that it's going to be right for him a bit. And he said, there's been no international cricketer who's ever boxed professionally. So he said, that'd be pretty cool. And like, he did the right thing. He appealed to my ego. And I went, yeah, that would be pretty cool actually, wouldn't it? So I said, when's the fight? He said, Saturday. I said, well, what day's today? It's Tuesday. So the next thing you know, I was like going in there to box. So I went there. I won that fight by knockout. And then I came back to where I'd been wrestling and doing jiu-jitsu, and they were all like, you just got a professional knockout in boxing and you're a wrestler. You should fight in MMA. I was like, I'm not fighting MMA. That's crazy. Next thing, I was getting approached by promoters to have an MMA fight. And I was like, nah, it's crazy. I'm not really going to do that. And then my trainer, who was there again, he said, yeah, you know, no one's ever been an international cricketer, boxed professionally, and then fought in the cage. So I was like, yeah, that would be pretty cool. So then I was lined up going in to do that. So that sort of led to this mad 4 years of fighting professionally. So
what did you take from that to compare to cricket? Did it fill the void that cricket left at all?
It's different, very different. It's an individual sport, which you don't really appreciate the differences, I think, until you do it. You do everything yourself. I mean, obviously you got a team that you work in. You know, I had my trainer who I've got a very close relationship with. But there are a lot of similarities. So, you know, your goal setting, your discipline, your peaking for performance, your arousal awareness, all these things are transferable. So there were a lot of things I took from cricket which helped me in fighting. Actually, I'm writing a book on it. Actually, it's called From Amateur to Professional. The book's not about me. It's a self-help book on how to transcend from being an amateur into a professional and the attributes required and how to sharpen those tools and how to become the best. It could apply to anything, not cricket, boxing. It could apply to any sport or activity.
It's kind of a mad 10 years that from when you stopped playing. You've packed in 2 different sporting careers. You had 2 businesses, financial troubles as well. How are you feeling?
And a divorce as well. So no, I wasn't feeling great, to be honest. It was a pretty tough time. Obviously grieving my brother as well. So that void. I mean, I guess you're never really over that. So and you've got to deal with that throughout the process. So yeah, to be honest, it hasn't been the 20 years that I spent around here was, you know, all smooth sailing. I mean, I think the worst thing that happened to me during my time here is I got a duck or bowled an expensive spell or dropped a catch or something like that. And then all of a sudden, 96 comes along, we lose Graham Kersey. 2002, we lose my brother. And then from there, it's just been a sort of catalogue of traumatic events which have sort of happened as I go along. But I mean, that's kind of life, isn't it? That's the journey we're on. And it happens, you know, to all of us at some stage. And I guess it's just how we react to those things that define how happy you're going to be. I mean, if I'm looking at it on a timeline, it looks horrible. Do you know what I mean? It's not good, but you know, I can deal with it. It is what it is, and you got to be a man, and you've got to try and face those things and be there for your family. So, so my dad always, you know, told me, you know, if you're going to be a dad, you've got to lead the family, and you've got to, and I think that's something which I've always tried to do, even as captain of the side. I always stood up for my players. Hopefully, I don't know, you'd have to ask the boys, but I don't think I ever showed them that anything was going on in my private life. I always kept a pretty upbeat, and I kept any troubles or things out of the front of my mind. It's like the way I try and keep my mind as well. I mean, no, everyone's got their troubles. I mean, you'll have your problems. You know, I feel that part of being a man is, and I know there's this new movement where you got to talk and what have you, but I don't know. I feel sometimes that's manifesting things and you're keeping them in the front of your mind. You just got to move past it. I think you got to be strong, and I believe that fate is always, the love of fate. Whatever comes to me, I love it and I deal with it. So it is what it is. I mean, it's a very you saying, and it hasn't been a good 20 years. I mean, it's 22 years since my brother died. It hasn't been enjoyable, but it's a journey. So it's you just got to keep going and be strong and know that I have faith that the future is going to hold better things for me.
And part of that journey was coming back to cricket, so you got into cricket coaching. How long ago was it when you started working in coaching?
I think it was about 2018 I first went back in, and there was a guy called Gordon Lord who'd been pestering me to come back and coach ever since I retired, head of specialist coaching here in England. And I was like, I will one day, Gordon, but like, now's not the time. And then I finished fighting and I realized that I need sport, I need competition in my life. So I rang him up and said, mate, Gordon, I'm ready to come back and coach. And he said, I resigned from that job a month ago. So he said, but give Straussy a call. How do you get on with Straussy? And I said, I don't know, actually. I don't think I get on with him very well, because all I did when I played was sledge everybody. But when I rang him up, he was glad to hear from me. And I said I wanted to get back into coaching. And he helped me. And the first job I got was with the England T20 side. My first job was with England versus South Africa. Was straight back in there as a consultant. I went in there, and then from there I joined up with England Lions, and I spent 3 months with them. And then from there I went and got a gig with Queensland. So it's been a roller coaster ride of like being back in cricket. And then just recently I was with Pakistan. So I was in Pakistan for 3 months. So it's
What was that like? You had a turbulent 22 years, but Pakistan cricket's probably the most turbulent cricket place in the world.
It was turbulent, but beautiful guys. They love cricket. They're passionate about it, and the players are amazing. It was just the board and the people. It's very volatile up there, and they change a lot. So for the players, that's hard because they never know if they're in, they're out, who the board is, who's going to be picking the side. So they're suspicious, and rightly so. And it's hard to build a good foundation when there's that atmosphere around. That it definitely holds them back, 100%. There's no doubt. I can just tell just by my time talking with the players that they never felt settled. They've got a new message. I mean, it's like you're getting a message from a boss one day, this is how you want it. And then 6 months later, you got someone else coming in, changing what the goals and parameters of the team are. So you're constantly changing, and then the personnel are changing. If you think of the great teams, if I ask you the West Indies side in the 70s, not only can you tell me the team, you can tell me the batting lineup. And if you ask me the great Australian side of the 90s, not only can you tell me the team, you can tell me the batting lineup verbatim. You can give it to me exactly, because it's the consistency which creates the performance. So if I asked you to name a Pakistan team for the next 6 months, there would be 40 different names on there. And that's no way to run a successful team. So, and even like if we look, if that Australian side in the 90s, not only can I give you the batting lineup, I can tell you who's going to open the bowling. I'm going to tell you how long they're going to bowl for. I know what field. I know what fielders' positions are because of consistency. And it's hard for those guys in Pakistan because they just don't have that.
How much do you think your coaching philosophy is shaped by the last 22 years? In that you were able to be more philosophical, almost bring a sense of perspective that at the end of the day is only a game?
Yeah, I think that helps. I'm doing a doctorate in psychology as well. So, I mean, I feel like I've learned the lessons of life through trial and error. I've kind of lived it. So I've learned a lot, and I'm quite perceptive. I'm quite analytical in that I analyze things. Why does that happen? Why does that happen? And I'm quite, I guess in that way, I'm quite inquisitive. But now I'm doing the doctorate in psychology as well. I'm getting the theory behind it. So it's been quite an interesting journey, and learning a lot about myself along the way. I don't know if it's a mixture of those things, of my learned experiences, a mixture of learned cricket stuff from other coaches and from my psychology background, and putting them all together and trying to work out how to handle people, how to talk to people. I mean, I feel like I've naturally always had a good way of connecting with people. And what I put that down to is I had something like 14 schools growing up. So I was constantly having to make friends at new schools just because of the amount my dad traveled. And now it's just refining that and learning the nuances of the modern game and knowing when to pass on knowledge and when not to. So I think you're always evolving. I'm certainly not the finished article as a coach. I think I've got a lot more to learn, and you've always got more to learn as a coach, because I feel the place people you learn the most off as a coach is the players, because the game changes. I remember the best coach I've played under is Keith Medlicott. I feel like during that time, I taught him more about the game than anything, because I was doing things out there that weren't going on 10 years before. So these were things that we tried. He was the one who encouraged it, and he couldn't physically go out there and do it anymore, but he encouraged me to try these things and was open to those ideas. So I think part of being a coach is not look upon it as you're talking at the player on how to do things. You're collaborating with them and finding out what things work. I've never played a game of cricket with a pink ball. The hell, what am I going to talk about a pink ball? But there's similarities in the way the pink ball behaves to some situations I've been in. Maybe something I say can spark an idea or a tactic that the modern player can adopt to then come up with a new way of counteracting the pink ball. So Hollywood would have you believe that coaching is about walking into a changing room of guys who are bottom on the ladder, giving a Churchillian or Denzel Washington type speech, and then they go and win every game. And go, that's not how it is. That just isn't how it is.
What does the future hold? If you're coaching at the moment, you're doing your studies. What is that? Have you got any particular aspirations or goals for the next few years?
Yeah, I just want to keep improving as a coach. I'm not sure I've found my exact role as a coach yet. I feel that I've done consultant coaching and assistant coaching, but I haven't done a head coach's job yet, not for a big team. So
is that something you want to do?
I would love to do that. I feel that that's where my strengths lie. I mean, I've learned on the job as being a consultant coach, but I feel like my strength and the most similar job to being a captain is a head coach. Consultant coaching, you're not really leaning on your captaincy background so much. You're specifying on tactics and biomechanical stuff that you learn along the way. So a lot of the skills of my captaincy or on my psychology, they're used individually, but they're not used on the whole team as a whole. So I feel like head coaching for me is untapped for me. So once I get a go at that, I feel like that's where I'll be my best.
Thanks for listening, folks. We'll be back later in the week with an episode of the Wisden Women's Cricket Weekly podcast.